What happens when a sharp-tongued comedian meets a defensive royal who's tired of being questioned? You won't believe what unfolds when Prince Harry sits down with Bill Maher and everything goes sideways in spectacular fashion. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of Real Time started like any other, but within minutes it became clear that something was brewing between host Bill Maher and his guest Prince Harry. What began as pointed questions quickly spiraled into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history, culminating in a dramatic walkout that left audiences stunned. The tension was palpable from the moment Prince Harry walked onto the set. Maher, known for his no-nonsense approach to interviewing, had clearly done his homework. The comedian's opening remarks seemed innocuous enough, welcoming Harry to the show and acknowledging his recent media appearances. But seasoned viewers of Real Time could sense the undercurrent. Maher's trademark smirk was already forming, and his eyes held that familiar glint that usually preceded his most devastating takedowns. "Prince Harry, welcome to the show," Maher began, settling into his chair with the casual confidence of someone who owned the room. "You've been making quite the rounds lately, haven't you? Netflix deals, tell-all books, interviews with Oprah. It's almost like you're building a media empire on the back of royal drama." Harry shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening slightly. "Bill, I think that's a bit of an oversimplification. We're sharing our truth, our experiences. There's nothing wrong with wanting to set the record straight." Maher leaned back, that characteristic eyebrow raise beginning. "Your truth? See, that's where I get confused. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've found a pretty lucrative career in being professionally wounded. Every interview, every documentary, every book, it's all about how hard your life has been as a literal prince." The audience laughed nervously, sensing the bite in Maher's words. Harry's posture straightened, his media training kicking in, but the flash of irritation in his eyes was unmistakable. "I think you're missing the point entirely. This isn't about money or publicity. It's about accountability, about speaking out against institutional racism and the toxic culture within the monarchy." "Institutional racism," Maher repeated slowly, as if testing the words. "Let me ask you something, Harry. You grew up in palaces, had access to the best education money could buy, traveled the world on taxpayers' dime, and now you live in a mansion in Montecito. When exactly did this institutional racism affect your day-to-day life?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Harry's media smile faltered for just a moment, replaced by something harder, more defensive. "That's exactly the kind of dismissive attitude that perpetuates these problems. Just because I had privilege doesn't mean I can't recognize and speak out against systemic issues." Maher wasn't backing down. If anything, he seemed energized by Harry's response, leaning forward with renewed interest. "But here's what I don't understand, and maybe you can help me out here. You say you want privacy. You say you want to be left alone. But then you do interview after interview, documentary after documentary. You can't have it both ways, can you? We never asked for privacy from telling our story." Harry shot back, his voice rising slightly. "We asked for privacy from harassment, from invasion, from the constant lies and speculation. There's a difference." The audience was completely silent now, the earlier nervous laughter replaced by a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Maher's expression shifted, his casual demeanor hardening into something more pointed, more dangerous. "Lies and speculation," he repeated. "You know what? Let's talk about some of these lies. You've accused your family of racism, of cutting you off financially, of refusing to provide security. But then reports come out showing that your father was still supporting you well into your 30s, that security arrangements are more complex than you made them seem. So who's really spreading the lies here?" Harry's face flushed red, his composure finally beginning to crack. "Those reports are completely inaccurate. The palace has a whole machine designed to protect certain members of the family while throwing others under the bus. I've lived it. I know how it works. A machine, Maher said with a slight chuckle that somehow managed to sound both amused and condescending. You mean like the machine you and Megan have built? The production deals, the foundation, the carefully orchestrated interviews? You've got your own publicity machine working overtime. The comment clearly hit home. Harry's hands clenched slightly in his lap, and when he spoke, his voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. You're deliberately mischaracterizing everything we've done. We left because we were being destroyed by that institution. My wife was having suicidal thoughts because of the treatment she received. And that's terrible, truly, Maher said, his tone momentarily softening before hardening again. But you know what I find interesting? Every time someone questions your narrative, you play the mental health card. It's like a get-out-of-jail-free card for accountability. The studio fell dead silent. Several audience members could be heard drawing sharp breaths. Harry's face went from flushed to pale, his eyes narrowing dangerously. When he spoke, his voice was low, controlled, but vibrating with barely contained anger. Did you just suggest that my wife's mental health crisis was fake? Maher realized he might have crossed a line, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. I'm suggesting that conveniently timed revelations about mental health struggles have become your go-to response whenever anyone asks tough questions about your choices. And that's when everything changed. Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The cameras caught the exact moment his carefully maintained composure finally shattered completely. "How dare you?" Harry said, his voice shaking with rage. "How dare you sit there and mock my wife's pain, mock what we went through? You have no idea what it's like to watch someone you love suffer because of relentless attacks from the media and your own family." Maher remained seated, but his body language had shifted. Gone was the casual confidence, replaced by something more alert, more combative. "I'm not mocking anything. I'm asking legitimate questions about timing and motivation. That's what journalists do, or what they used to do before everyone became afraid of offending people." "Journalists?" Harry laughed bitterly, still standing. "Is that what you call yourself? Because from where I'm standing, you're just another shock jock looking for ratings by attacking people who can't fight back." The accusation clearly stung. Maher's face darkened, his famous smirk disappearing entirely. "Can't fight back? Are you serious? You've got Netflix, Spotify, book deals, and a global platform. If anything, you've got more reach than I do. Don't play the victim here." "There's that word again, victim," Harry shot back, his voice rising. "Every time someone speaks out about injustice, about being mistreated, people like you immediately label them as playing the victim. It's a way to dismiss legitimate grievances without having to actually address them." Maher stood up now too, the two men facing each other across the coffee table that suddenly seemed like a battlefield. "No, Harry. Here's what I see. I see someone who had everything handed to him on a silver platter, who walked away from responsibilities and duties and then spent years publicly trashing the institution that gave him that platform in the first place." "Handed to me?" Harry's voice cracked with incredulous anger. "You think having your mother die in a car crash while being chased by paparazzi, having your every move scrutinized since childhood, having your mental health ignored while you're forced to smile and wave, you think that's having everything handed to you?" The mention of Princess Diana sent a ripple through the studio audience. Maher paused, seeming to recognize he was entering even more dangerous territory, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Your mother was a tragic loss, and I'm not minimizing that. But millions of people have tragic losses, and they don't get to spend the rest of their lives monetizing their trauma." "Monetizing?" Harry's face went white with fury. "You think this is about money? You think I enjoy reliving the worst moments of my life for public consumption? You think Megan enjoyed being suicidal just so we could get a Netflix deal?" Maher's eyes flashed dangerously. "I think you've found a very profitable way to weaponize your pain, and anyone who questions it gets labeled as racist or heartless or both. And there it is, Harry said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The real issue. You can't stand that we called out the racism, can you? You can't stand that we exposed the ugly truth about how the British press and the royal family treat people who don't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. Oh, please, Maher scoffed. Everything's about racism with you people. Your wife gets criticized and suddenly it's because she's biracial. You get pushback for abandoning your duties and it's because of racism. It couldn't possibly be because people think you're behaving badly. The phrase, you people, hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Several audience members gasped audibly. Harry's hands were visibly shaking now, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. You people? Did you just say you people while denying that racism played a role in our treatment? Maher immediately realized his mistake. His face flushing red. That's not what I meant, and you know it. I meant people who cry racism at every criticism. No, you meant exactly what you said, Harry fired back. And you've just proven our entire point about the casual racism that people like you don't even recognize in yourselves. The studio was electric with tension now. Production assistants could be seen hovering at the edges of the set, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Maher, rattled by his own slip-up, doubled down with increasing desperation. Don't you dare lecture me about racism, he snapped. I've spent decades calling out actual racism, fighting for civil rights, supporting candidates who stand for equality. I don't need a lecture from someone who lived in palaces while real people faced real discrimination. Real people? Harry's voice was incredulous. So my wife isn't real people? Her experiences don't count because she married into the royal family? Her biracial children don't matter because they're princes? That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, Harry exploded. And it's exactly the attitude that drove us away. This dismissive, condescending belief that our experiences aren't valid because we have titles or money or privilege. As if privilege somehow makes you immune to racism or mental health struggles or family dysfunction. Maher was fully on the defensive now, his carefully crafted media persona crumbling under the intensity of Harry's attack. Look, I think you're deliberately misinterpreting everything I'm saying. I'm not denying that bad things happen to you. I'm questioning whether the constant public airing of these grievances is really about justice, or if it's become something else entirely. Something else, like what? Harry demanded, stepping closer to Maher. Like revenge? Like a vendetta? Is that what you think this is? I think, Maher said slowly, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, that you've turned family dysfunction into a brand. I think you've weaponized your trauma and your wife's struggles to build a media empire while claiming you just want privacy and healing. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Harry's face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, and then pure, undiluted fury. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet that the studio microphones had to strain to pick it up. But every word carried the weight of absolute conviction. You have no idea what you're talking about. You sit here in your comfortable bubble, making jokes about other people's pain, thinking you're some kind of truth teller, when really you're just another cynical entertainer who's lost touch with basic human decency. Maher's face twisted with anger. Basic human decency? You want to talk about decency? How decent is it to trash your family in public? How decent is it to make accusations of racism without providing specifics? How decent is it to drag your grandmother through the mud while she was dying? The mention of Queen Elizabeth was the final straw. Harry's composure didn't just crack, it exploded completely. Don't you dare bring my grandmother into this, Harry roared, his voice echoing through the studio. She was the one person who showed me unconditional love, who understood what we were going through. How dare you suggest I dragged her through anything? She supported our decision to leave because she knew what that institution was doing to us. Maher, sensing he had pushed too far but unable to stop himself, pressed on recklessly. Really? Because that's not what the report said. The report said she was hurt, confused, felt betrayed by your very public attacks on the family she spent her entire life serving. The reports? Harry's laugh was bitter and wild. You mean the same royal correspondents who spent years attacking my wife? The same media that you're parroting right now? You're just another mouthpiece for their narrative, aren't you? The studio audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the raw emotion pouring out of both men. Maher's face was flushed red, his carefully maintained television persona completely abandoned. I'm not a mouthpiece for anyone. I'm asking the questions that millions of people are thinking but are too afraid to ask because they might get called racist. Questions? Harry stepped even closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. These aren't questions, Bill. This is a character assassination. This is exactly what drove us out of Britain. This sneering, dismissive attitude that treats our pain like entertainment. Your pain has become entertainment, Maher shot back, his voice cracking with frustration. Every documentary, every interview, every book chapter, it's all packaged and sold as content. You've turned your family trauma into a Netflix series. Harry's eyes blazed with fury. And what do you turn human suffering into, Bill? Punchlines, comedy bits. At least we're trying to help people by sharing our story. What are you doing besides tearing people down for laughs? I'm holding people accountable, Maher snapped. I'm asking the tough questions that sycophantic interviewers won't ask. Someone has to call out the hypocrisy. Hypocrisy? Harry's voice rose to near shouting levels. You want to talk about hypocrisy? You sit here lecturing me about family loyalty, while you've spent your entire career mocking and attacking public figures. You talk about accountability, while refusing to acknowledge your own biases and prejudices. Maher's composure was completely gone now. His face twisted with anger. My biases? I'm not the one who abandoned my country, my duties, and my family to go make millions in Hollywood, while playing the victim. There it is again, victim, Harry said, his voice shaking with rage. You just can't help yourself, can you? You can't conceive of a world where someone with privilege can also be genuinely hurt, genuinely wronged. It threatens your entire worldview. What threatens my worldview, Maher snarled, is watching someone with every advantage in life convince themselves they're oppressed while real people face real struggles. Harry took another step forward, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Real struggles? My wife contemplated suicide because of the abuse she faced. I watched my mother die because of media harassment. I've struggled with my mental health for years because of trauma you can't even begin to understand. But sure, tell me more about what's real. The raw emotion in Harry's voice seemed to cut through the studio like a knife. Several audience members could be seen wiping their eyes, but Maher remained unmoved, his jaw set in stubborn defiance. And I'm sorry for all of that, truly, Maher said, his voice tight. But at some point, you have to stop using your trauma as a shield against all criticism. At some point, you have to take responsibility for your choices instead of blaming everyone else. Take responsibility. Harry's voice cracked with incredulous fury. I take responsibility every day. I take responsibility for protecting my family when the institution that was supposed to protect us failed. I take responsibility for speaking out when staying silent would have been easier. What I won't take responsibility for is other people's racism, other people's cruelty, other people's inability to see our humanity. Maher shook his head dismissively. Everything comes back to racism with you. It's like you've got one note and you play it over and over until people stop listening. People like you stopped listening before we even started talking, Harry fired back. You've made up your minds about who we are and what our motivations must be. You can't accept that we might actually be telling the truth, because that would mean admitting that your precious institutions are flawed. My institutions? Maher laughed harshly. I'm American. I don't give a damn about the British monarchy. What I care about is truth. And the truth is that you've built a career out of airing your family's dirty laundry. Harry's face went white with rage. A career? You think this is a career choice? You think I wanted to spend my life defending my wife against racist attacks? You think I wanted to relive my trauma in public? I didn't choose this. It was forced on me by people who couldn't accept that we deserved basic human dignity. Basic human dignity, Maher repeated mockingly. Most people consider living in palaces and having millions of dollars to be pretty dignified. And there's your problem, Harry said, his voice suddenly calm but filled with steel. You think dignity is about money and titles. Real dignity is about being treated with respect, regardless of your background, being allowed to protect your family, being able to speak your truth without being attacked for it. Maher opened his mouth to respond, but Harry held up his hand, his expression shifting to one of cold resolve. You know what, Bill? I'm done. I came here thinking I might have an actual conversation with someone who claims to care about truth and justice. Instead, I've been ambushed by someone who's more interested in cheap shots than genuine dialogue. Running away again, Maher called out, his voice dripping with contempt. That seems to be your go-to move when things get difficult. Harry stopped in his tracks, turning back to face Maher one final time. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but carried absolute authority. I'm not running away from anything. I'm walking away from someone who has shown themselves to be exactly the kind of person who made our lives unbearable. Someone who disguises cruelty as comedy and bigotry as bold truth-telling. Someone who thinks attacking people who are already hurting makes them brave. He began unhooking his microphone with deliberate, measured movements. You want to know the real difference between us, Bill? When I see someone struggling, someone in pain, my instinct is to help them, to protect them. Your instinct is to mock them, to tear them down, to question their motives. And you wonder why the world is becoming more divided? Maher stood there, his mouth slightly open, seemingly stunned by the quiet intensity of Harry's words. The studio was so silent that the click of Harry's microphone being unclipped echoed through the space. I hope this was worth it for you, Harry said, his voice carrying a note of genuine sadness beneath the anger. I hope the ratings and the viral clips and the commentary from people who already agreed with you anyway are worth contributing to the kind of culture that destroys families and drives people to desperation. He placed the microphone carefully on his chair and looked directly into the main camera. To anyone watching this who's struggling with their mental health, who's facing discrimination, who's been told their pain doesn't matter because of their circumstances, don't listen to people like this. Your struggles are real, your feelings are valid, and you deserve dignity and respect, regardless of what anyone else thinks you should or shouldn't have. With that, Prince Harry turned and walked off the set with quiet dignity, leaving behind a stunned audience and a host who for once in his career seemed completely at a loss for words. The cameras continued rolling as Maher stood alone at his desk, the weight of what had just transpired settling over the studio like a heavy blanket. The interview that was supposed to be another notch in his confrontational belt had instead become a moment that would define both men, one walking away with his integrity intact, the other left to face the consequences of his own cruelty. As the credits began to roll over the silent studio, it was clear that this wasn't just the end of an interview. It was the end of an era, where public figures could be attacked without consequence, where pain could be dismissed as performance, and where basic human decency could be sacrificed for the sake of a punchline.